Today we are doing 1.1 Graphs and Graphing Utilities. This is day 1. Our learning goal is for you to be able to graph equations and interpret information from a graphing calculator. You're going to need graph paper when you do your assignment, but the first thing that we're going to do is plot points in the coordinate system, which should be review. But you know, this is our coordinate system. This is our x-axis and our y-axis. And they'll give you a point to plot. And hopefully no one has any problems plotting the points. But they're going to ask you to graph certain equations. And so they'll tell you what the x values are. And let's say we had x squared minus 1. And they'll tell you what they want x to be. So let's say they want x to be -3, -2, -1, 0, 1, 2, and 3. And so what you would do is plug those values into your equation. So if x is -3, we would get 8. If x is -2, we would get 3. If x is -1, we would get 0. If x is 0, we would get -1. If x is 1, we would get 0. 2 would be 3. And if you notice, our y values repeat again. So then from there, you'll just graph and you plot the different points. I'm going to count by 2 since actually, let me redraw this graph so I don't have enough room. Okay, and then you just plot the points from your table. -2, 3, -1, 0, 0, -1. And if you notice, this is the shape of a parabola. Oops. And then you're done. Okay, when you see the word graphing utility, that means usually with your graphing calculator. And what happens is when you have a graph, usually we go from -10 to +10. So when we're looking at a viewing window, this is how they would write it. And the first set refers to your x coordinates. What this means is this is your x minimum. This number is your x maximum. And this last number tells you what you're counting by. So these are the tick marks. So that means you're counting by ones on your graph. So it'll be -10, -9, 8, 7, 6, 5, so forth and so on. My graph is not large enough to let me go all the way. But basically, So that means you're just counting by ones. And the same on the other side. Probably should have made it a little neater. Okay. That's what that means. And then when they say by, these are the y coordinates. Same thing. So this is your y minimum, your y maximum, and that's your tick marks for your y coordinates. So that means you're counting by 1. So you always want to make sure you look at this, because sometimes they'll use another number. For example, if you see something like this, this means these are your x, these are your y values, and we're going from -2 to 3, but we're counting by halves. And then for your y's, we're going from -10 to 20, counting by 5s. So you have to make sure that you look at your window. That's called your viewing window. To see where you're starting, what's your smallest number, what's your largest number, and what you're counting by. Your graphing calculator also has a table feature that looks like this. And if you go to table, well, first of all, you have to have an equation already entered. Like this. And so what this means is your x coordinates are in the first column. You have 2 different y coordinates, which means there are 2 different equations. Okay? And so they're going to ask you questions about your table, so you have to make sure that you look at the table to determine or to answer the questions. So one of the questions may be, which one of your y columns what represents y equals absolute value of x? So you would plug in the values of x. So let's start with when x is -3, the y would be 3. So you know it can't be y1, it would have to be this one. When x is 0, or excuse me, -2, we should get 2. So that's still that one. And if you keep going, you'll realize that this equation represents the column y2. Well, let's do pink for the other one. When x is -3, I'm going to get 4 minus 9, which equals -5, which is the first y column. And if you keep plugging in the values, you're going to notice that you're getting these y, or these answers, which means the first column represents y1. Or your first y's represents this equation. So they're just going to ask you questions about your table, and you have to make sure you look at the values to answer the questions correctly. And that's it for day 1.